The only thing tested that morning was my self-control. Because when I looked out the window and saw a tow truck driver hooking my son's handicap van while he was still in it, my hands clenched so tight, my nails left bloody half-moons in my palm. My son, Michael, 15 years old, with a spine that curves like a sickle and lungs that need help from a ventilator, was strapped inside a van with tinted windows and a blue disability placard swinging on the mirror. It was our lifeline, our mobility, our freedom. And some woman in Lululemons and too much perfume was screaming at the driver to just tow it already. She didn't see me at first. I stood frozen behind the glass, the coffee mug slipping from my fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor. Kylie, my wife, was in the kitchen, humming, oblivious. Our daughter was asleep upstairs. But my body already knew, some primal, courtroom-forged instinct, that this was about to become a federal moment. I stormed out, barefoot, heart thundering. The tow truck driver hesitated. He'd seen the placard now, finally, but she didn't stop. That woman. Karen. "You can't just let them leave junk in the street," she snapped, turning toward me with a smirk that said she'd gotten her way 1,000 times before. "Your son needs to learn there are rules." Michael's eyes met mine through the tinted window. He wasn't crying. He looked used to it. That broke me. "I suggest," I said calmly, coldly, like I was back cross-examining a cartel boss, "you unhook that van in the next 30 seconds, or I will have you both arrested for false detainment, reckless endangerment, and civil rights violations under the ADA." The driver blinked. Karen laughed. Until I pulled out my ID, Department of Justice, United States Attorney. And just like that, her smile evaporated. But that moment, that wasn't the climax, that was the warning shot. The prologue. Because what Karen didn't know was that I had just begun to trace the veins of a rot far deeper than one HOA board. And when she came after my family, she picked the wrong damn prosecutor before the subpoenas, before the cameras, before the HOA board meetings turned into bloodless court battles. I was just a father trying to hold it together. After 12 years as a federal prosecutor, most of them in the organized crime division, I'd finally accepted that you can't bring the war home. You have to build something quieter, softer. So when Kylie and I found that modest cul-de-sac in Willow Hills, it felt like a place that wanted us back. Trees that arched like cathedral beams, yards with swing sets, quiet dogs, retired Marines and Costco dads, people who waved. It was the kind of neighborhood you fight to stay in, not to survive it. Michael was born premature. He wasn't supposed to make it past 3 days. He made it 15 years. Spinal muscular atrophy, type 2, which meant a wheelchair, surgeries, breathing machines, a van with a lift that cost more than our first house, but also meant watching him smile when he solved a chess puzzle in under 5 seconds or tell jokes that made his little sister belly laugh at dinner. He was brilliant, and he was tired. We enrolled him in the local charter school, remote access at first, then half days when he felt strong. Kylie gave up teaching to stay home full-time. I requested to work part remote, filing federal briefs from our dining room table while nurses and therapists came in and out of the house like clockwork. Our schedule was rigid. Our life was not spontaneous, but it worked. And for a while, so did the neighborhood. There was Fred, retired postman, 2 doors down. He'd bring in our mail when Michael had hospital days. There was Jasmine across the street, who ran a little bakery from her kitchen and left fresh snickerdoodles on our porch after Michael's first surgery. And Mr. Nolan, who played chess with my son once a week in our garage. People were kind, the kind that doesn't post about it. But even then, I noticed the signs. A yellow flyer left on our van windshield. Driveway use must be compliant with HOA rules. Non-operational vehicles will be towed. A passive-aggressive note about yard aesthetic standards because our wheelchair ramp was made of wood, not aluminum. A stranger walking past and muttering, People with special needs should consider gated communities designed for them. Karen hadn't introduced herself yet, but her fingerprints were already everywhere. At first, I chalked it up to bureaucratic fussiness. I'd worked with enough pencil pushers in government to know how rigid rule writers could be. But it wasn't just rules. It was tone. It was coldness dressed as civility. And I've learned in court and in life that cruelty rarely wears a hoodie. It wears a collared blouse and speaks in bylaws. Kylie tried to brush it off. "We've been through worse," she said. "Let them huff and puff." But something in me knew. Peace. This fragile doesn't break on its own. It gets pushed. Her name wasn't Karen. It was Elaine Whitmore, but if there was ever a woman who embodied the meme, it was her. She wasn't loud. Not at first. She didn't need to be. Karen was the type who wielded power like a scalpel. Sterile, precise, and always under the guise of order. President of the Willow Hills Homeowners Association for 8 years running. Blonde hair sprayed into a helmet. White linen pantsuits, even in winter. Oversized sunglasses that made her look like a retired soap opera villain. She drove a pearl-white Lexus and parked diagonally across 2 spaces. Always. "For door clearance," she once told a neighbor with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. She spoke in clipped professional tones, like every sentence was a legal notice. Her vocabulary was all compliance, enforcement, and aesthetics standards. And when she smiled, it looked like she was chewing on bad news. What made her dangerous wasn't just her title. It was the loyalty she commanded. HOA board members, hand-picked, mostly retired professionals with too much time and not enough empathy. She ran the neighborhood like a private company. Residents, clients. Dissenters, liabilities. And violations. Opportunities. Every month, new rules appeared. Every quarter, new fines were mailed. Grass too long, $50. Trash bins visible from the street, $100. Holiday decorations still up after January 7th. Citation. Every ticket came with a veiled threat. Non-compliance may result in lien against property. And Karen? She never told you she was watching. She showed you. Like the time Fred's mailbox got dented. HOA sent a letter the same day. Or when Jasmine's visiting niece parked slightly over the sidewalk and a tow truck appeared within the hour. Same driver, I'd later realize, who came for my son's van. Her power wasn't absolute, but it was ambient. You felt it in the silence after a board meeting, in the way people lowered their voices when she walked past, in how no one ever confronted her directly. Because she knew exactly how to weaponize the system. She knew how to make decency look like disorder, and disability look like non-compliance. I asked a neighbor once why she never pushed back. The woman just shook her head. "Karen can ruin you," she said. "Financially, socially, quietly." But Karen made a mistake. She thought she could poke at everyone the same way. She didn't know I spent a decade dismantling criminal organizations with less reach than her HOA. She didn't know that I recognize racketeering when I see it, whether it's in a casino, a corporate boardroom, or a suburban cul-de-sac. And most fatally, she didn't know I document everything. The van incident wasn't isolated. It was an escalation. The first direct hit came 2 weeks prior, during one of Michael's worst respiratory spells. He'd just come home from a 5-day PICU stay. Kylie and I were tag-teaming meds, nebulizers, and physical therapy shifts. No one was sleeping. His room smelled like saline and anxiety. That morning, a notice was taped to our front door. Third and final warning. Unauthorized structural modification. Ramp non-compliant. It wasn't just a fine this time. The letter threatened legal action for permanent code violations. The ramp that had allowed Michael to exit his house safely, now considered a violation of community aesthetic standards. Kylie stared at the paper like it had slapped her. "Are they asking us to tear it down?" she whispered. They're asking us to trap our son inside, I answered. I called the HOA number listed. It went straight to voicemail. I emailed. No reply. I checked the HOA website and noticed something odd. Minutes from the last board meeting had been edited retroactively to include a vague note about mobility fixture approvals requiring prior authorization. It was dated 3 days after we'd built the ramp. They were rewriting the rules after the fact. Michael was confused when he overheard us. "Am I not allowed to live here anymore?" he asked. That question shattered something in me. We tried to reason with them. Kylie even attended a board meeting, pleading calmly, documents in hand. Karen didn't let her speak, said the time for open comment had technically ended, and suggested we submit a request in writing. 1 week later, CPS showed up, a caseworker, young, nervous, holding a clipboard and avoiding eye contact. She said there had been an anonymous complaint about neglect, something about an unsanitary medical environment and possible emotional harm. She walked through our living room, past the medical-grade air purifier, past the color-coded med log, past the therapy calendar hanging next to our family photos. She asked Michael a few questions. He smiled and told her he was building a model of the Apollo 11. She left with apologies, said she saw no concern, but the damage wasn't in the visit. It was in the fear Kylie felt when she thought someone might take her son away, the fear Michael felt when he asked if they were going to put him in a hospital jail, the fear I felt when I realized this wasn't about bylaws anymore. This was psychological warfare. They were trying to break us by targeting the one thing we would never leave behind, our son. That night, I sat in my garage and stared at the files on my laptop. Every brief I'd ever written against coercive systems. Every case where a paper trail hid abuse behind legal decorum. And I realized something chilling. Karen had studied our pressure points like a seasoned interrogator. She didn't want us fined. She wanted us gone. But she hadn't read my file. Hadn't realized I once spent 6 months embedded with the FBI's Civil Rights Division, chasing down local officials abusing federal disability laws. Hadn't realized that false CPS reports are a federal offense when used as retaliation. She thought I was a father with no fight left. She was wrong. That night, I placed a call to a former colleague at DOJ. Then I opened a blank spreadsheet and started logging every incident, every fine, every flyer, every whispered threat. I wasn't filing complaints anymore. I was building a case. There's a special kind of dread that sets in when you realize the enemy isn't a person, it's a machine. And Karen? She wasn't a rogue actor. She was the operating system. After the CPS visit, things didn't slow down. They accelerated, like we'd triggered a tripwire. A week later, our property tax assessment was re-evaluated. The county sent us a notice of increase, 23% higher. Cited community valuation trends. Our home now conveniently ranked above the 90th percentile for amenities, despite having a visible medical ramp. Then Kylie's car got towed from our own driveway. Overnight guest policy violation. We didn't even have a guest. 2 days after that, an HOA newsletter went out to the neighborhood. Buried in it was a vague paragraph about families under review for unsanitary or unsafe home conditions, and a note about how certain individuals may abuse the goodwill of medical exemptions. No names. But all eyes were on us. Michael stopped asking to go outside. Fred, our elderly neighbor, started walking to the store instead of driving. Said he was afraid his truck would be towed if it was parked too long. Jasmine's niece moved out early. After Karen's assistant left a voicemail suggesting non-family occupants violated zoning covenants. It wasn't just us. It was a system of soft threats and silent punishments. I began digging, late at night, after Michael fell asleep, after Kylie collapsed in bed from worry. The HOA was listed as a nonprofit, but the accounting didn't make sense. Administrative fees had ballooned 240% over 5 years. Legal retainers were issued to the same firm, Barrows and Kellerman LLP, a firm I knew had been investigated twice for kickbacks involving real estate boards. I found HOA board meeting videos, quietly uploaded to a private YouTube channel by a resident who'd since moved. In one, Karen referenced strategic removals of non-compliant members. Another showed a vote to rezone the community park area into revenue-generating parcels. No resident votes, no notices, just quiet, polished tyranny. And then I found the first real crack in the wall. A series of emails forwarded by Fred. Fred, sweet Fred, who smiled like a grandfather and moved slower than he spoke, had been quietly collecting correspondence. He'd been fined for planting unauthorized flora, lavender and basil. He sent a complaint, and someone accidentally CC'd him on a thread that revealed much more. Karen had referred to certain homes as low-yield lots. She wasn't talking about violations. She was talking about people. That's when I understood. This wasn't about appearances. It was about asset curation. Karen was running the HOA like a hedge fund, eliminating value-draining families under the cover of bylaws in order to prep the neighborhood for acquisition. The real estate firm? Vera Cove Properties, newly registered, no website. But a search of public records showed it had already acquired 6 homes on our block, all foreclosed after HOA disputes. This wasn't a petty war. This was a scheme. A quiet cleanse of the imperfect, the inconvenient, the unprofitable. And Michael, my brilliant, wheelchair-bound son, was inconvenient. It all clicked when I reviewed the towing company's business license. They're listed corporate liaison, Elaine Whitmore. Karen wasn't enforcing rules. She was manufacturing them. Every violation, every citation, every false report. A move in a larger game. Financial pressure here, social shame there, legal intimidation as the clincher. She had weaponized suburban bureaucracy with clinical precision, so I started fighting back, silently. I bought a set of discreet security cameras, hidden in light fixtures, one inside a fake sprinkler head near our driveway, another in the birdhouse Michael built for a school project. I recorded every HOA interaction. I contacted a friend from law school now working at the IRS, shared what I found on Vera Cove's purchase records. I reached out to a journalist at a small investigative blog Kylie used to follow, sent them tips anonymously. I scanned every letter, saved every voice message, logged every neighbor's experience in a digital folder I named Operation Blindfold. And all the while, I smiled at Karen, at board meetings, at the mailbox, at HOA events where she handed out sugar cookies like they were peace treaties. I smiled, and I watched, and I waited. Because the system that protects predators only works if victims stay isolated. And I was done being quiet. The worst part of surveillance is who you become while doing it. Every night, after tucking Michael in, after double-checking his ventilator settings, after watching Kylie fall asleep, still clutching a worry in her hands, I'd sit alone in the dark with headphones on, watching our own life like a case file. Clicks, zooms, playback. Watching Karen walk her dog past our ramp 3 times in one day. Listening to a voicemail from a board member joking, maybe the boy should be homeschooled. He's depressing to look at. I felt like a sniper, calm, calculating, distant, and I hated it. I hated how natural it came, how easily I slipped into that role again, the operative, the trap setter, the one who records, not reacts. There's a moment every soldier faces, when survival starts to feel like performance, where every emotion becomes intel, every kindness, leverage, every silence, bait. I told myself I was protecting my family. But late one night, while reviewing a camera feed, I caught myself whispering something under my breath. Let her slip. Just once. Give me the bullet. It stopped me cold. That wasn't the prosecutor in me. That was the hunter. The man I thought I'd left behind in federal courtrooms and RICO cases. The man who enjoyed watching the powerful fall, not for justice, but for revenge. I closed the laptop. I sat there in the dark for hours, asking myself the question I hadn't dared to until then. Am I becoming what I prosecute? I remembered a case I tried once. Small-town sheriff skimming drug bust money, justifying it by saying I only took from criminals. I destroyed him on the stand. But afterward, as I stood in the mirror fixing my tie, I caught a flicker of doubt, a ghost of understanding. People don't become monsters all at once. They bleed into it, bit by justified bit. So I asked myself the only question that mattered, would Michael be proud of this version of me? And I knew the answer. I couldn't be the man who just outmaneuvers evil. I had to be the one who refused to play its game. So I called in a favor, a quiet one. A friend at the U.S. Attorney's Office, someone who owed me a favor and knew how to keep their mouth shut. I told them, this is no longer about HOA codes. This is organized suppression under the guise of compliance. I want to build it clean, bulletproof, not for headlines, for justice. And then I did something harder than clicking record. I knocked on Fred's door. I need your help, I said. And that's when the real war began. Fred's living room smelled like pipe tobacco and old paper. His hands trembled slightly as he slid the folder across the table. I don't know what this is, he said, but I think you do. Inside, 10 years of HOA letters. Some typed, some scrawled with red pen, photos, copies of checks, a sketch map, a photocopy of a torn memo labeled Varicove Development Strategy, Phase 3, Transfer Through Compliance. My chest tightened. Karen wasn't running an HOA. She was running a harvest pipeline. Fred's notes were meticulous, handwritten margins noting dates, times, witness names. Apparently, 5 homes on our block alone had been turned over after sustained fines and legal harassment. Each one purchased by Vera Cove through a shell LLC just weeks before property seizure. All now rented out or flipped. And then Fred showed me the ledger, a literal black notebook, pages stiff from years of handling, names, dates, crossed out entries, and 3 columns labeled Yield Conversion Timeline Resistance Rating. I saw my family's address. We were listed as high PR risk, legal background confirmed. Proceed with indirect pressure only. Below that, asset target Q4, ramp dispute strategy, possible CPS leverage. They had gamed us out like a war simulation. This is racketeering, I whispered. Fred nodded, grim. I was HOA president before Karen for 3 months. When I started asking questions about fund allocation, they staged a vote of no confidence, but I kept watching. And he wasn't the only one. Jasmine, the baker across the street, was part of a Facebook group for HOA abuse victims. She connected me with a woman in Arizona. Same story, different name, a different Vera Cove shell company, same law firm, Barrows and Kellerman. One night, while digging deeper into developer LLCs, I found the keystone, a man named Richard L. Whitmore, Karen's husband, not ex, not deceased, just hidden. He ran a boutique real estate consultancy, specialized in transitional communities, advised on value recalibration through private ordinances. A euphemism, I realized, for bleed out the weak, sell to the strong. He was the architect. She was the blade. It explained everything, even the HOA's obsession with secrecy, silence, isolation. They weren't enforcing a community standard. They were cleansing a portfolio. And there, at the heart of it all, was Karen. Not just a bureaucrat, but a matriarch in a quiet dynasty of systemic displacement. Her HOA board was a front. Her compliance officers, mercenaries in cardigans, and her bylaws, they were weapons. Everything now made sickening sense. The over-policing of ramps, of flags, of children's toys on lawns. Each infraction a data point in a value assessment algorithm. Each fine a warning shot. They had turned homeownership into a scalable eviction engine, but what they hadn't accounted for was me and the file I was building. Because now I had it all. A motive, economic extraction, a pattern across state lines, a method, abuse of civil code, a paper trail, both analog and digital, and witnesses, real people ready to speak. Karen wasn't just HOA president anymore. She was a suspect in a federal investigation. And I was done waiting. There's a moment when the hunted becomes the hunter, and when I crossed that line, I crossed it for good. I called it Operation Folded Flag. Not because it was about war, but because this was about honoring the fight my son had been born into and giving him peace without asking for permission. Front 1, digital warfare. I started with data. First, I compiled everything, every video, email, audio recording, HOA fine, real estate record, and financial inconsistency into a secure digital dossier. I built a private server, air-gapped, off-grid, with mirrored backups in 3 states. Then I anonymized the files and sent them to 3 federal agencies under different aliases: DOJ Civil Rights Division, ADA violations, and HOA overreach, IRS criminal investigations, undeclared developer revenue, coordinated shell acquisitions, FBI white-collar crime unit, interstate racketeering, property seizure through fraud. Each packet was traceable, each file internally dated, each story triangulated by testimony. But I didn't stop there. I built a small website, unbranded whistleblower style, with redacted samples. I called it the HOA Blacklist. I seeded it into HOA abuse forums, disability advocacy networks, and journalist tip lines. Let it breathe. Then I waited for the panic. Front 2, psychological and media. I reached out to Claire Mendez, the freelance investigative journalist who once exposed a retirement home chain for elder abuse. Gritty, persistent, and burned by networks that wouldn't run her stories. I handed her the file. In return, she handed me time-stamped audio, Karen, during an HOA executive session, laughing, "If they don't like the ramp rule, they can move or sue. Either way, we get the house." Claire published a 3-part series, The Cleanse Behind the White Fence. It went viral on Reddit, then on Twitter, then The Intercept picked it up. People started asking questions, not just about Karen, but about HOAs nationwide. Meanwhile, I sent anonymous mailers to every resident in our neighborhood. Your fines, your home, your silence, they're not random. Enclosed, screenshots, quotes, dates. Karen didn't show up to the next HOA meeting, but I did. And I brought Fred. We recorded it. The shouting, the panic, the demands for answers, and the whisper that slipped through a board member's teeth. "We should have stopped this before the prosecutor got involved. Oops." Front 3, legal and tactical. I filed a formal complaint with the State Attorney General's office under my real name. I attached everything. But more importantly, I called in Elias Cho, former federal agent turned private investigator. Good man. Better instincts. He agreed to infiltrate the property acquisition side, pose as a buyer for Vera Cove. Within 2 weeks, he confirmed Karen and her husband were using the HOA not just to flip property, but to funnel assets into a silent investment trust registered offshore. Money laundering, wire fraud, tax evasion, civil rights violations, and possibly criminal conspiracy. I coordinated with a contact inside the FBI to stage a final trap. A community planning meeting hosted at the HOA clubhouse. Fake development proposal. Karen would be there to pitch it. Richard, too. We wired the room, bugged her phone, synced everything with a live relay, and I walked in late, badge in my wallet, anger in my bones, but calm on my face. Karen saw me and smirked. "You're not supposed to be here," I smiled back. "Neither are you." She didn't know the feds were already outside. Didn't know I'd recorded the handshake deal 10 minutes prior. Didn't know that her empire had just fallen, by her own words. I nodded once. And the door burst open. The room was cold with control. Karen sat at the head of the conference table in the HOA clubhouse, hair perfectly coiled, blouse spotless white, eyes gleaming like a queen presiding over her court. Her voice was soft, crisp, soaked in disdain. "This development phase will double neighborhood property value," she said. "Of course, certain undesirable elements will need to be addressed for that to happen." I stood at the back, arms folded. I said nothing. She clicked the next slide. It was a digital render. Townhomes, faux luxury style, where the neighborhood park once stood, where Michael and I used to fly model rockets, where Kylie hosted a birthday party for our daughter with homemade cupcakes and lawn games. She didn't just want to profit, she wanted to erase. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. Karen leaned back and said, just barely audible, "We've already acquired 7 lots below market. A few more families removed, and Vera Cove will take over the remainder. This time next year, clean slate." I nodded once. The room went still as 3 men entered, dark suits, badges flashing. "Elaine Whitmore," the lead agent said. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, civil rights violations, and federal racketeering." Her mouth opened, then closed. Richard stood, stammering. "This is a misunderstanding. These are strategic acquisitions." The agent turned to him. "Mr. Whitmore, you're also under arrest. Money laundering and falsified records. Please come with us." Karen's control slipped all at once. Her face twisted, not in fear, but in fury. She turned to me, voice rising. "You did this. You set me up, you little lawyer rat." I stepped forward slowly. "I'm not just a lawyer," I said quietly. "I'm a federal prosecutor." "And you came after my family?" She lunged. The agents held her back. The room was silent except for the click of metal as cuffs locked into place. She was escorted out through the same door where she once hosted HOA barbecues, smiling with fake kindness, sipping wine like royalty. Now she wore that same white blouse, but it looked different under fluorescent lights and zip ties, like a funeral dress. The neighborhood felt different the morning after Karen's arrest. Quieter, but not with fear, with relief. A tension that had been pressing down on every doorstep, every window shade, every whispered conversation was gone. Like someone had finally turned off the alarm we all pretended we couldn't hear. A week later, I received a letter from the HOA, the former HOA. The organization had been officially dissolved under a court-supervised agreement. All enforcement operations suspended, all pending liens invalidated. Every resident received a refund of improper fines, along with a formal apology drafted by the State Attorney General's office. I didn't smile when I read it. I exhaled. That afternoon, Fred and I stood where the clubhouse used to be. The building was cordoned off for investigation. Tape flapped in the breeze. He handed me something, a folded piece of paper. Inside was a typed note. "You didn't just win. You freed people who forgot they were prisoners." It wasn't signed, but I recognized Jasmine's font. The neighborhood slowly reassembled itself. Yards grew imperfect again. Lawn chairs stayed out overnight. Kids drew chalk murals on the sidewalk. Someone started a weekend chess club for kids in Michael's honor, even though he couldn't always attend. And then came the garden. We started it where the HOA sign used to sit, an ugly slab of plastic with Willow Hills, Proud Community, in blocky authoritarian font. Now it was a patch of life. Community built, no permits requested, no bylaws consulted, just people planting hope. We named it Michael's Garden because even though my son lived, part of him had been stolen by that time, his sense of trust, of safety, of worth, and we needed to give him a world where those things could grow back. One day, as he watered a row of sunflowers, he turned to me. Does this mean we won? I knelt beside him. No, I said. It means we stopped losing. 3 months later, an envelope arrived. No return address. Inside, a single photograph. A woman, tall, dark blazer, sunglasses, standing outside a courthouse. Not Karen, not anyone I recognized. But behind her, partially visible, was a building placard. Westfield Community Board, Nevada chapter. Taped to the back of the photo was a yellow Post-it. She used to sit 2 seats away from Karen. They called her the architect. Vera Cove wasn't the first project, just the quietest. There was no signature, just a smudge, black ink, a partial fingerprint. I ran it through a private contact with access to an old DOJ database. Hit confirmed. Name, Celeste Morano, former urban planning consultant, tied to 3 LLCs under federal audit. Suspected involvement in asset cleansing schemes targeting low-income homeowners. Last known activity, forming a new HOA in Nevada. New Shell Corp, Cypress Unity Group, same playbook, different zip code. Michael came into the room while I was holding the photo. Another one? I nodded. You gonna stop her too? I smiled. Only if I'm not the only one. If you've ever been fined for a ramp, threatened for a flag, silenced for protecting your child, then you already know this story isn't mine alone. It belongs to every family bullied behind fake bylaws, every veteran forced to uproot, every parent shamed into silence by a neighbor with a clipboard and a God complex. If you've lived it, or if you're living it now, don't do it in the dark. Tell your story. Speak up, send it, share it. I'm building a record. Because the only thing HOA bullies fear more than exposure is unity. And if enough of us speak, we won't just stop Karen. We'll dismantle the system that built her.